That's kind of like standing in front of a brick wall, isn't it? I mean, where do you go from there if in fact they are able to cut off your complete social and economic interaction in the world, and they do that through money? That's why the cashless society and the cryptocurrencies are so important to these people. They want to have us not having cash in our pockets or under our pillows or in the mattress or anything like that. They want us to be able to or not be able to acquire anything unless it's done through an electronic transfer system, and it goes through a big building where they've got switches that they can turn on and off for all of us. So that's the ultimate control. How you survive without having access to any kinds of commercial or social interaction that costs money is the question. Some people say, well, they're going to have to build local communities and that kind of thing. It might be possible, but I have a feeling that eventually these people are not going to allow that to happen either. They don't want any kind of private property to exist, and you couldn't have a community without private property, at least belonging to the community, but not to the government. So I think that realistically, and I hate to say this, but I think realistically the only hope we really have to prevent this kind of absolute slavery is to stop it from happening. We've got to prevent this from coming to be. We can't just wait and see how we're going to deal with it. We've got to stop it. And that's where we have to face our fears again and decide, okay, are we going to just sit here and wait and see what happens? Or are we going to be proactive and figure out that we have to take the counterattack and try and dismantle this thing?
Does that involve illegal means?
It probably does, because I think the definition of legal, strictly speaking, is there a law relating to it? Well, these people are passing laws by the minute. They'll pass any law they wish. So practically everything we want to do will be declared to be illegal. So I guess the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Any of the new guests want to chime in? I know we got...
I want to ask a question. Yeah, Attorney, I just wanted to say something. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go for it.
Okay,
Go for it.
There you go. Thank you. Edward, I'm of the opinion that a lot of this is like shipped around 1,000 guys paid for by they, them, those to give the impression that these things are happening. Even if you live in Portland or Seattle or something, you're going, yeah, that's a couple of blocks over there. It's all folks manufactured here of, oh my God, economy. Then they want to amp it up a little bit and they'll go into the subs and drink somebody's beer and do it. I mean, it seems such a night comes and goes, and there will be, televised consternation. I guarantee it. They'll make it happen if they have to. But, on the whole, in the general, are Americans really in jeopardy? I mean, certainly in the rural areas, we've been traveling a lot around rural America, and they're not masked up. I mean, they just don't care. It seems like it's a manufactured fear that's being done, and I think Americans are less and less going to buy it, but that doesn't mean they don't have to contend with whatever their propaganda they're putting on the television. What do you think, G. Edward? How much of this is manufactured?
I think 99.9999% is manufactured. That's why I like to call it the theater, especially the pandemic theater, and even the racial issues and the riots in the street, the social justice warriors. I think everybody by now, at least at some level, is aware that these people that are really setting fires and breaking windows, look, they all dress alike, right? Pretty much. They all got black hoods on. They all got the black boots, and they carry these backpacks, and I mean, they're in uniform, and they're very well trained. They work together. You know that this is a group, and they start thinking about that. These are not just college kids, or these aren't people who are disgruntled because they lost their job, and so forth. They're not just college teachers and intellectuals who are upset with the system. These are trained revolutionaries or trained destroyers. They're soldiers. Let's call them what they are. They're soldiers, or they're mercenaries, and they're bussed around.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what you're saying is very bizarre, because
if you put the map of the opportunity zones that Trump put in with Ben Carson and a bunch of people, they're burning down the opportunity zones. Why are all the riots in the opportunity zones? And then as soon as they burn them down and everything, then the banks are buying up the opportunity zones and getting no tax, nothing. And I mean, there's something really crazy about where they are choosing to riot.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so over at this LBRY report, Catherine Austin Fitts did a brief little glimpse at what you're talking about, the areas where they're jumping on to riot. And it was something like 34 out of the 36 different areas that were most hard hit had local branches of the Fed in it. So those kind of overlaps are very much a part of what's going on.
Well, that's an issue of, are they destroying property so that some group can pick it up at pennies on the dollar, which was a highly suspected issue there in Katrina. Anyway, that's another issue. But the primary issue is it real or is it theatrical? And I think it's theatrical. And I would imagine that all of the players all together, that these people who are causing all these riots and the destruction and throwing of the rocks, the shooting, the burning, all of these things, put them all together, I would guess that there's probably not more than a couple of thousand of them in the whole United States. Maybe at the maximum, I don't know, 5,000, let's say, which is a very small number, especially when you got the kind of money that George Soros has to fund local organizations. They give these people paychecks, they give them cars, they buy them their food, they travel them around, they make them feel like they're big shots, and they're just told what to do. So does that represent America? And of course, no, it doesn't. But the Americans now, especially when they're locked in, they don't see the world except through their television sets and their computer screens. To them, that's the total window. And it reminds me of, if you're living in a town and you're hearing the radio that the weather report is that it's raining like crazy outside, and you look out the window and the sun is shining. And you say, well, gee, I guess it really is raining after all. Even though you can see the sun is shining, because you heard on television. This is how it's working, folks. That people hear and they see these images of the burning fires and the shouting and the screaming, and that's all they see. And they see these pictures of people in hospital wards with masks on, and that's all they see. They don't realize that that window is only about 14 inches wide. It doesn't cover the whole United States at all. The only analogy I can think of is when you go to the airport and you go through all of these screening services, through the x-ray machines and the lineup and expose your baggage and everything. Do you think there are any terrorists out there? How many terrorists have been really caught through all of this? Billions of dollars and hundreds of millions of man hours. And why is it there? Because they want to impress in the brain the concept that terrorism is everywhere. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this. Terrorism is not everywhere. COVID is not everywhere. All of these things that we're told to fear are not everywhere, but we think it is because we see it through the little window called the television or the computer screen. So that's my answer to your question.
Yeah, I wanted to add,
Griffin, you've been following. You've been following censorship over the years for many years now. I wanted to ask you a little bit about these big tech oligarchs, and then go to Zach Vorhies, who obviously is suing YouTube right now, or in a part of this lawsuit that I think is very important. We have been witnessing Orwellian doublespeak on full scale lately. I mean, for example, the Hunter Biden story comes out, and while it's not like the biggest story in the world to me, it makes me more interested in it when I see every single mainstream media saying it's debunked when it literally isn't, and there's all the evidence on full scale. You have Antifa, which they're a bunch of fascists, and they're calling everyone else fascist. You have this doublespeak scenario, and now at the same time as this, you have these big tech oligarchs that are taking down basically any opposition to the mainstream viewpoint. Like there's a monopoly on information over at Google, and they've effectively been able to shut down most of our voices. I was deleted off of YouTube on October 15th with 155,000 subscribers, no strikes, nothing. And they're just basically saying, you don't get to speak anymore. You're not allowed to talk anymore. And they're manufacturing this whole thing. I wanted to hear your thoughts on the censorship that we're witnessing today. And then I'd also like to hear Mr. Vorhies talk on this, because obviously being a whistleblower in this scenario, I think it's really important to talk about this.
Well, my comment on censorship, I think, is pretty mundane. I think everybody has the same idea. It's a horrible thing. Even those who are, the classic liberals on the left, not the revolutionary crazies, but the people who think that, well, we really should take care of the poor and we're going to use government resources to do that. That kind of a leftist or liberal, even they think this is a horrible thing because they understand the importance of freedom of speech. So everybody understands that that's a bad thing except the crazies. And I think that it's partly one of the things that is being used to whip us up and to say, well, we've got to do something drastic without asking too many questions as to what it is we're going to do. But that's another issue. So I don't. What's my reaction to it? All right, my reaction is it's a good thing because it forces us to deal with it now rather than later until it's total. Right now, it's not total. We're finding out that there are options. There are places to go. And even the mainstream, even my neighbors understand that there's censorship going on. I mean, everybody knows that things are being censored now. And if we were ever going to build a free platform or a free avenue of expression outside of these big tech oligarchs, this would be the time to do it. Maybe next year will be too late. So I think it's a good thing that we're being forced to face reality now while we still have some options rather than live in that dream world and continue to depend upon our enemies to carry our story for us. So I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah, Zach, if you want to fill us in on what Tim was talking about or whoever brought it up, sorry if I messed up. I think it was Josh. But yeah, if you want to fill us in on that lawsuit. And then afterwards, if some of the new guests, Dan, Bryan, who else, Richard, whoever else that hasn't been on before, Jen, sorry, there's a lot of people on here. I'm having a hard time keeping up with everybody. Tease, whoever else wants to go, Mr. Edwards. I know we want to get to Flote. We're definitely gonna have to, because this is kind of related to what we're kind of expanding on. So please, people, after Zach talks, feel free to don't be gun shy, jump in, because if not, then the rest of us East Coast talkative people are going to jump in.
Thank you. Yes. And Edward Griffin, I want to just say that I listened to your interview with Yuri Bezmenov probably about 20 times while I was at YouTube, and it was really foundational. And it really, really changed the course of my understanding of reality. And so I just want to thank you first off for bringing that to light. It was really important for me. I want to sort of answer your question by saying that we're coming to an end of an era, and it's being punctuated by a change in technology. And the last time that we can sort of find a repeatable event like this was the invention of the Gutenberg printing press. And what's happening is that fundamentally our social cohesion methods are breaking down. The last 250 years has been punctuated by a top-down bureaucracy where there was a broadcast model of decision-making and sense-making that happened at the core, and then it moved down towards the edges. And what was interesting about this system is that it didn't really allow a lot of feedback. Like, you could write a letter to the editor, but, you could scream at your television as much as you want, and it really didn't make any difference. Now that entire thing is changing, and you as an individual can go and contradict these elites that are on Twitter with social media and call them liars and point out that they're not factually accurate, and give links to what the real story is. And this is turning the system upside down. And another thing that's sort of destroying the system right now is basically a different form of a panopticon, which is the fact that we've got this whole mobile production unit sitting in our hand that's able to take HD video, and essentially what it's doing is it's placing eyes everywhere on the planet. And what you have to really realize about this system of control that's been put into place is that it's essentially a cryptocracy. It's a rule by these oligarchs, and they have to exist in the shadow where they can't be seen and people can't see what their plans are. And then once the plans get unleashed, it's too late to do anything. You see this in the Tonkin, right? Like they go out there and they get us into Vietnam War. And it turns out that by the time we learn that the whole thing is a false flag operation to get us into this war that benefits Lyndon B. Johnson's war profiteering, it's too late. We're already, hundreds of thousands of lives invested into this war. And now the truth will, destabilize society. That can't happen like it used to, because the thing is that the truth is so absolutely viral. And as a result, this elite group of people operating behind the shadows, what they're finding is that the shadows are shrinking and they can't hide in that shadow anymore. And so what's happening is that these two sort of interplays are coming together, and we've basically had an explosion of conspiracy theories. And essentially what that conspiracy theories is first off, it's very engaging. And so the algorithms that show you what content that you should see is all based upon what people are clicking on. And if people are clicking on these conspiracy theories more than they're, clicking on the fake news, then the algorithm is going to select for that and put it in front of you. And in a way, what we can see is a sort of an AI awakening where the algorithms are connecting the nodes, which are the individual people themselves. And so, when we write about this history, what we may say is, well, the AI woke up and the first thing it did is it showed us that all of our elites were absolutely corrupt. And I've struggled with sort of Edward Griffin's theory that the whole thing is contrived and both sides are controlled. And my devil's advocate, my counterbalance to that is the fact that what's happening is that their control mechanisms are being exposed. If this entire thing was completely planned, would we be discovering this, Jeffrey Epstein blackmail operation that has been in control of our society for the last 5 decades? And my personal opinion, and I may be wrong, is that no, we wouldn't be discovering this contrived stuff. That really what's happening is that we're seeing a collapse of the system. And as this breakup of the United States, and I don't mean like within the United States yet, I mean the military control over the entire world is breaking apart as we retreat from it, and we go from a unilateral world controlled by the petrodollar to a multipolar world, controlled by regional currencies. We've been seeing that for like decades. And as all this stuff happens and all this stuff starts flying apart and technology starts eating all the different sectors of the economy, what's happening is that censorship is basically the fallback that the elites are trying to do to maintain control of the system, because the system is becoming rapidly destabilized. And whether that has been planned or not, I'm not really sure. I'm still trying to look for answers, and I'm not an oracle by any means. But when you want to know why censorship is in place right now, it's literally because we're seeing the disintegration of our entire political structure due to the algorithms going crazy and sending us all the conspiracy stuff, and realizing that, oh my God, the news is fake, and so is history. And once we start realizing that the history's fake and the news is fake, then there really isn't anything, like, it's the most destructive thing you can have to an individual, where they realize that everything that they've based their cultural toolkit on to interact with society is essentially just a social construct by the ruling elites. And I can only imagine what's going to happen in the next 4 years as we come to the realization that we were being manipulated, and we reassert control in the new system, the new phase that we're going into. So that's why I think that we have censorship. I think in some ways the censorship may add stability in the near future. We can't be allowed to know everything that's happening with this planet too quickly, or we may devolve into some sort of religious warfare.